Hi there, how's it going? If there's one thing I've learnt over the years, it's that I'm not very good at segues. Also, who is that standing in front of the stock footage? Straw hat, slim build, grippers out for absolutely free, and his name is Monkey D. Luffy, the main character and star of today's show, that being One Piece. It's gonna be a double whammy in a sense, where I discuss my thoughts surrounding the franchise in order for my evaluation of the new game to make more sense. And in truth, any excuse to talk about the series, and I'm not just taking the bait, I'm taking your rod and all. So, to begin with, I'd like to talk to those of you that are apprehensive about starting One Piece, and that could be for various reasons. Maybe there are those of you that started with the 4Kids version all those years back, and the best advice I can give is to forget it ever happened. The way they treated the source material was baffling at best, and at worst, insulting. And the only good thing to come out of it was the opening, and I mean that largely in an ironic way. So I'm hoping you'll change your mind by the end of this video.
Yo ho ho, he took a bite of gum gum.
And of course, there are people out there that just don't enjoy anime that much as a medium, or simply have no burning drive to sit down and commit to something like One Piece. I have a friend in mind who I'm willing to sit down and watch an entire arc with, just to see if his opinions change. Because even if anime isn't his cup of tea, American cartoons certainly are. And if you had to pick an anime to comfortably sit him down with, it'd probably be this one. Sorry for dragging you into this, buddy.
Fish people.
Usually I find people can be filtered by the art style, and to that I say, stop it. Naughty. Go to bed without porridge. But in all seriousness, I understand people have aesthetic tastes, and sometimes that can be a genuine reason to avoid something. I've done the same, but I challenge you to challenge yourself here. All it took was one "I'll give this a go" in early high school, and I haven't been able to drop it since. Being able to see the stakes gradually build of the early arcs whilst you learn about the characters, their outlooks, and what makes them tick. Then, as if they really wanted me to make this joke, it bared its teeth and bit down hard. There was no way I was stopping after the Arlong arc. It had me hooked, and it knew it. Perfectly blending comedy, drama, some intense character moments with satisfying arcs, and with a conclusion that audibly made me celebrate. If the rest of the show was going to be like this, or got even better, I knew I wouldn't just love this. It would become a favourite. And sure enough, it did. And One Piece, for those of you who might not know, is the treasure of one Gol D. Roger, the Pirate King. At his execution, he proudly announced to the world that he hid all of his treasure in one place. The one who can find it can claim it. The world would name this treasure One Piece, and it would spark the great age of pirates, something which, years later, would inspire our hero to set off on his own pirate journey. This young man, known as Monkey D. Luffy, has a massive advantage and disadvantage when it comes to sailing on the open sea. He accidentally ate the Gomu Gomu no Mi, or the Gum Gum fruit, when he was a child, otherwise known as a devil fruit. This seemingly innocent snack would gift Luffy's body with the properties of rubber, being able to stretch his limbs to an inhuman degree. The downside is, he won't be able to swim from this point on, as the sea will strip a devil fruit user of this ability. And what is born from such a simple starting point is something that I love with all my heart. I can't bring myself to say anything less. Something I wasn't expecting when I first started the series was the emotional roller coaster each arc took me on. And I need to say this before I move on, but One Piece, despite everything I'm about to talk about, is an extremely funny show. I wasn't surprised by this, because ancient clips of funny One Piece moments are what got me into reading the manga and watching the show. But along the way, I realized I wasn't just laughing anymore. I was holding back tears. Even earlier arcs before Arlong had situations that left me deeply upset. And the more the show progressed, the more it would introduce topics and themes that took me off guard and sucker punched me. Major societal power balances, racial prejudice, slavery, intergenerational trauma, and government cover-ups that, if ever found out, could bring the world crashing to its knees. When One Piece wants you to stop laughing and focus, it forces your attention. And something as simple as an expression or quote can bring me hurtling back to how I felt in that moment. And those feelings have barely dimmed as time ticked on. Can't say the same for this scene, no idea why. pure coincidence. Looking back, I can definitely see why younger me was pretty stunned at how shocking One Piece could be. The art style admittedly contributed towards that, and I'm not trying to say cartoons can't and haven't had these themes before, far from it. It was simply my first exposure to just how expansive anime can be as a form of media, and how that media can affect me. I love how the world of One Piece looks, the cartoonish nature of it all commonly drawing comparison to Looney Tunes. But the consequences of violence are taken seriously unless the scene is directly asking for laughs. Broken bones and internal bleeding are serious threats. Terrible people can and will attack the ones you love, and there's a high chance you won't see them ever again. One thing that's regularly criticised about Oda's writing, and sounds like it might contradict my previous point, are character deaths, or lack thereof. And yeah, I can see why people would say that. Sometimes there are characters that are torn apart at a subatomic level, but 2 chapters later it's like,
"We got better."
So I understand. However, for me, it's the threat of death that Oda displays every now and then that keeps me anxious. And when he's confident enough to let the guillotine fall, the impact is immensely effective. The world being the way it is actually makes me appreciate Luffy even more, and serves as another reason why Luffy is a fantastic protagonist. Because if this is a world of Looney Tune-like properties, then he's the tune. With the way his body bends and stretches, it's as if he's not governed by the simple rule sets of any average human, instead feeling as if he took notes from the rubber hose animation era.
Oh, I get it!
And whilst there are obvious limits, sometimes his attitude alone made him feel invulnerable, which brought a great deal of comfort in the earlier arcs. But then you find out that those terrible people I mentioned have found out ways to render Luffy's power meaningless, and can, if he isn't careful, kill him without a second thought. The metaphorical comfort blanket has been ripped away, and it's now time to see how Luffy can use his imagination to make it out of the arc victorious, and to ensure his bones won't join the countless others that litter the oceans of his world. Or he could be like this guy and, you know, join him. Speaking of laughter, I want to take the time to talk about one silly sausage that not only serves as great proof for Oda's character writing, but also for showcasing how amazingly strong Luffy is as a presence in the One Piece world. Here's a spoiler warning in case you want to go in completely blind. 3, 2, 1. In the Jaya arc, Bellamy the Hyena was a very naughty boy. Serving as a minor antagonist to Luffy, he's more like a pest than a threat, being considerably weaker than him but is far too stubborn to realise it. Now at this point, the crew are only in Jaya to search for clues on how to reach the mythical Sky Islands, and after finding this out, they are relentlessly mocked by Bellamy for this. Thoroughly cynical, the man has a poor view on those who dare to dream. Dreams are something created by a dying breed of people, trying to explain the unexplainable, and that those who die for something outlandish or seemingly unattainable are nothing but fools. This is why people like Luffy and his crew disgust him. Every person on this man's ship are fueled by dreams. Their entire adventure revolves around Luffy's dream to become the Pirate King, and each member has a goal they aim to achieve. This is why when Bellamy antagonizes Luffy at the bar, he and Zoro don't bother to fight back. Nami here felt like she stood in for the audience, begging them to retaliate because she knows, just like us, that they can do it. But in the end, Bellamy is nothing more than a bell end. Luffy doesn't feel threatened by this man. He knows he can win, and most importantly, he isn't getting in the way of Luffy's dream. And by performing the same action his hero Shanks did when he was a child, it not only demonstrates his growth from the start of a series, but it's another thing which sets Luffy apart from any run-of-the-mill pirate. Bellamy is known as the big-time rookie. Luffy is just big time. Then, slowly but surely, as the arc progresses, Bellamy begins to poke the bear. He robs a man of his gold, beats him bloody, and leaves with his prize, and this wasn't a smart move. This man is Luffy's friend. The gold that was stolen was proof of this man's dream. And not only that, but he's the only one who can reinforce Luffy's ship to reach the Sky Islands. So, no matter how minor, Luffy now has something in direct opposition to his goals, which means he now needs to remove this object from his path. And as a reward for having this insipid little man buzz around our ears for 9 episodes, we're graced with a show-stopping scene. With the obstacle removed, Luffy offers only 2 words to Bellamy's angered crewmate, demanding to know where he's going. His drive and ambition have never been stronger. And I don't need to be the one to tell you, but Luffy and his crew do accomplish their mission. And many episodes later, as the cries of victory echo throughout the sky and Luffy's shadow is cast down, magnified by the light and clouds, one man finds himself looking up at it. Bellamy's entire life philosophy has been completely annihilated. Luffy has proven without a shadow of a doubt that people who have dreams can indeed accomplish them. And that might be the trigger that Bellamy needed. The fact that this lovable moron can convince a scumbag like Bellamy to potentially reevaluate his life choices and become a better person? I'm not even afraid to admit it. It gets me emotional. As to whether or not he makes these changes, you'll have to read the manga or watch the show to find out. On that note, if you're curious about the best way to experience One Piece, I'd say both the manga and anime have their merits. The manga is definitely the fastest way to catch up, and despite the anime being clowned on over the years for its inconsistent quality and abysmal recaps at the start of episodes, I still can't help but love it. If the event on screen isn't making you tear up while watching, the music sure will. The voice actors also do a stellar job throughout, channeling some raw emotion into their performances that lead to some goosebump-inducing moments. And I can't begin to tell you how many times I've laughed at their comedic delivery. It's so good. Some parts of the manga have been taken literally in the anime, such as certain characters' unique laughter that's become a staple of the series. And I can see this being another filter for some people, but at this point, I just think it's charming.
New card. What do you think?
Woohoo. Very nice. Look at that.
It's very cool, Bateman, but that's nothing.
Really nice.
Now, with the whole inconsistent quality thing, I have these crazy things in my head called eyes, so it's not hard to spot dips here or there. But it's never been so bad that I visibly recoiled. And you can see they're pulling out all the stops on the Wano arc, some scenes flat out taking my breath away. The recaps are definitely not great and the filler can get in the way of people trying to catch up, but there are sites out there documenting which episodes and arcs are non-canon, and certain fan projects that clean up entire arcs to fit the manga's pace. As for the series quality in general, it's an ongoing thing, so the chances are always there that it'll stumble before the finish line. And heck, there are some people that thought it was stumbling decades ago. I can sit and nitpick One Piece for days on end at this point, and I've definitely been unhappy with it in the past, but like, of course that's the case. There's over 1,000 chapters. You think if I had 1,000 children I'd love them all? No! Fuck you, Timmy! When my enjoyment of a series rests at a comfortable 90%, the other 10% still make up the rest of the journey. Am I nervous things can fall apart completely? Of course. The unknown can do that to you. But I think I'd find peace knowing Oda was happy with his final creation. I just hope he stays consistent all the way to the end, because there's really no better time to jump into the series, especially with the bittersweet news that Oda has approximately 5 or so years worth of One Piece left in his veins. It's definitely lit a fire under many old and potentially new fans to either start from scratch or start it for the very first time. To join us on the final few arcs before we finally find out, after all this time, just what the One Piece is. I think it's safe to say that when we finally get to that point and we see it on paper for the first time in 25 years, it'll shake the internet to its core. In the meantime though, video games.
Konnichiwa, Konnichiwa, Super Famicom.
I'm sure you can imagine that something as popular as One Piece would break into the games industry. Some of these titles being original and some being adaptations, and I'll admit I'm not the target audience for many of these. Yes, I might be a One Piece fan, but until I hear a majority consensus that the game is great instead of serviceable, I don't think I'll be paying top dollar for any of these titles. The only one I have played is the Musou game, One Piece Warriors 3, and this is a really fun title. I say this, however, as someone who enjoys this genre, and I'm well aware that Musou games are about as divisive as the Red Sea. Imagine my surprise when I'd see a trailer for One Piece Odyssey, a turn-based RPG developed by ILCA, main developers of Pokemon BDSP, and also assisted on titles like Nier Automata and Dragon Quest XI. This was enough to raise an eyebrow, to say the least. Using their experience in the industry, they could make something pretty special, and I was more than happy to give them a chance. So, skipping right to it, I suppose. After beating One Piece Odyssey, what were my final opinions on it? I mean, there's no point in hiding it, right? It beat me. An overwhelming victory. And I say this for transparency's sake. My reasoning for dropping Odyssey isn't entirely its fault, because it isn't a terrible game. But due to my state of mind at the time and in-game issues that I'll talk about later, there came a point where I had my head in my hands, wondering if I should scrap this video entirely before deciding to use it as an excuse to gush about One Piece. Thankfully, as I mentioned, this game isn't all bad. And we start our adventures in a brilliantly positive light. The game opens with the Straw Hat crew, consisting of Luffy the captain, Zoro the first mate, Usopp the sniper, Sanji the cook, Nami the navigator, Chopper the doctor, Robin the archaeologist, Frankie the shipwright, and Brook the musician, doing what they do best, staring dangerous, uncharted territory in the face, and their captain being more than happy to drag them kicking and screaming onto it. This island, named Waford, immediately greets the crew with bizarre, unexplainable weather, such as rapidly forming storm clouds that freeze the lightning that it sends out, forcing Frankie to launch their ship, the Thousand Sunny, out of harm's way, causing them to be shipwrecked in the process. Luffy loses his hat, which he needs for personal reasons, so we rush off to go find it. Also, Nami has been kidnapped by a big monkey, but you know, priorities. Immediately after rescuing Nami, we find ourselves greeted by the island's defense system in the form of large, machine-like colossi. Things which the Five Elders, massive figureheads in the One Piece universe, are quite nervous about the Straw Hats running into and potentially shutting down. The Five Elders, from what we know of them, will have no issue destroying the island if they feel our heroes are pushing things too far. And the Elders are correct to be worried, because at this point the Straw Hats are more than capable enough to stand toe-to-toe with the Colossus. For the non-One Piece fans in the audience, the timeline of this game is pretty muddied, but it's at least confirmed to be after the 2-year time skip in the series. So the game starts us off with a plethora of techniques that the crew had gained over their adventures up to that point. Even some funny hee-hee techniques like Robin's ball-busting ability. It was nice to see jokes evolve into actual abilities you can use in battle, and I mean, jokes can still be painful. That's what I built my career off. And seeing how the Straw Hats can easily go toe-to-toe with the island's main form of defense, it doesn't exactly leave us with much of a threat. This is where Lim steps in, her forehead demanding the audience's attention. This mysterious girl gently touches each of the crew as she passes, only managing to lay a hand on Luffy as he reclaims his missing hat from her. At this point, a bunch of bloody cubes rush out of him and scatter across the island. These cubes being the physical manifestation of the Straw Hats' memories, or to be specific, their memories of combat. They no longer remember how to use their abilities, which turns the Colossus from a punching bag to a formidable foe. Thankfully, we're saved by our second mystery character, Adio Suerte, a self-proclaimed adventurer who's been living on Waford with Lim for years at this point. Lim stealing the group's abilities due to her hatred of pirates. The source of this hatred being they murdered her parrot. And so, due to being indefinitely trapped and with the power level of a particularly noisy dog, the Straw Hats have no other choice but to believe the words of Adio, who claims the only way to get their memories back is to explore the island and find the cubes.
We're gonna go get me cube! We've got to go to Bendigo to get me green cube!
There are a couple of exceptions, however. During the fight with the Colossus, Frankie was off trying to fix the Thousand Sunny, and Brook over here fell overboard, meaning his body has sunk to the bottom of the ocean, but the Yomi Yomi no Mi allowed his soul to escape. Sperm boy. Saving these two as future party members was a smart idea. I admit I felt a shot of sadness after the game let me smell Frankie for about 15 seconds before taking him away, my brain barely registering the delicate scent of cola and battery acid. Obtaining new party members in RPGs is a fun staple, and considering how beloved these cheeky boys are, it's a great incentive to push forward. The first thing RDO requests from the crew after gaining a sliver of their abilities back is to take down the Thunder Colossus. We get a fun scene where RDO learns what we've known for years at this point, that Luffy is completely immune to lightning, and look, right from the get-go, my sus meter was peaking the audio levels with this guy, and in fairness, it seems like other crew members also held their doubts about RDO's true intentions, even if this doubt was, for the most part, internal. Making it through the dungeon, we take down the Thunder Colossus with ease, but it takes one final pot shot at Usopp before RDO steps in to save him with his Kote Kote no Mi, or the Grab fruit. With this power, he has the ability to grab any non-living thing and bend it to his will, and as I'm sure you can guess, they haven't given him this power for no reason at all. Now let me make one thing perfectly clear. Up to this point, I was really enjoying myself, but that's not to say issues weren't cropping up here or there. Starting with a positive, immediately after stepping foot on Warford, I was struck by how nice this game looks. The colours are bright and vibrant, something which the lighting engine complements as you move throughout the island. Certain textures have this chicken scratch look to them, which gives the impression of pen lines, or at least to me. Exploring dungeons wasn't bad, and I love the idea of each Straw Hat having different abilities to help them reach inaccessible areas or items. But the one which disappointed me the most was, funnily enough, Luffy. Needing to stop movement only to enter first-person mode to stretch Luffy's arms was potentially the best they could do. But this is Monkey D. Luffy, not Slug D. Slowfy. Who wrote this? I'm not expecting them to recreate Spider-Man 2's physics engine here, but removing the need to stop and zoom in each time would definitely help the flow and pace of the game. Even the animation didn't feel right, completely stopping all momentum to watch him gently fall to the ground. It's just, I don't know. Ugh. Does this make me petty? Maybe so. But when I play a One Piece game, I want Luffy to feel fun to control. And combining this with a dreadfully slow movement speed, it left me craving a lot more than the game was giving me. The music was fine, but I felt it didn't fit the tone of One Piece in a way that Kohei Tanaka's anime soundtrack nailed. Odyssey's OST feels a little too epic without the usual charm and whimsy One Piece's music usually has. The feeling of a cheeky pirate off on an adventure with his crew of misfits. It's fine. Fits the bill for decent RPG exploration and battle music. But I won't be using any of it for this video, and I think that speaks volumes. Just look at him go! Speaking of battles, see I told you I was bad at segues, gameplay was something that hooked me from the get-go, but it wasn't without its problems. One of my favourite parts? The creatures you fight. All designed by Oda himself. It makes my dream of a hypothetical Dragon Quest-like title where they hired Oda to create original characters and monsters that much closer to reality. And for real, I really want that to happen. Like, I'll pay for it. Animations and sound effects are on point. There were points where even if using Gomu Gomu no Gatling was unwise, I'd use it anyway because I love the animation for it so much. Fast forward mode being included was a wise choice as you can't skip these animations, but it wouldn't stop me from using Gatling gun because now it made it 2 times more funny. And the way gameplay worked for a turn-based RPG kept me fully engaged. Each character is split up into 3 types: power, speed, and technique. Each enemy takes more or less damage from each type, so it requires the bare minimum of brain power to win battles faster. Skills require technique points, or TP, to use, which can be recovered using items or by using basic attacks. These skills also have a long range and close range, and what that means is the battlefield is a little larger than you might have initially anticipated. Battles usually split your parties into groups, so let's say for example Usopp is fighting the group he's been paired with. He will be using close range attacks. Once he's defeated them, he has the option to either jump to another group or support them from a distance using long range attacks. Certain attacks can also launch enemies into other groups, which gives you the serotonin only a strike can muster. And sometimes battles can give you timed missions to carry out, like rescuing a party member from overwhelming odds, or landing the final blow with with a certain character. This was something I welcomed, even if the inability to simply skip turns made landing the final blow a bit of a nightmare sometimes, but you could still tell they were pulling all of the stops to make gameplay an enjoyable and, most importantly, engaging experience. I wish I could say they succeeded 100% of the time, but sadly, at least up to the point I played, I never found myself challenged by fights. I can count at least 2 times I leaned forward in my chair slightly, one during a boss fight and another during a segment where one character is forced to fight a single powerful enemy. But credit where credit is due, after laying everything the gameplay has to offer down, issues and all, you'd have a hard time saying they weren't at least trying here. But then, I say, stretching out the sentence to make the YouTube essay more tense, Lim had the fantastic idea to introduce me to the world of Memoria. And this, my beloved audience, was the beginning of the end for my playthrough. I asked a few people over on my Twitch chat whether or not I was alone here, and whilst none of them stopped completely, they did understand where I was coming from. So I hope at the very least that response will be mirrored here. Memoria are special worlds born from the Straw Hat's previous experiences. By diving into them and reliving these ghosts of the past can lead them to even more cubes. However, there is a twist. Events that occur within Memoria can be slightly different than the original memory, but that is all they are at the end of the day. They are memories. They are not real. However, if you die in the memory, you die in real life. So it's not as if there are no risks to be found here. This was an interesting concept to begin with. I like the idea of diving into past memories like the Alabaster arc and seeing it play out differently than in the anime and manga. But even then, I couldn't hide my personal disappointment that we'd be retreading familiar ground instead of Odyssey being confident enough to craft a completely original story. It also doesn't help that I had just finished rewatching all of One Piece, so the nostalgia of revisiting these places had already been sufficiently drained. Now, I really wouldn't have minded if 100% of Odyssey's story was completely non-canon. That's what the movies were, and I always dug how the characters in the movies were canon, but the Straw Hat's encounters with them were more of a what-if scenario. Whole thing could have been waffed and I'd have been happy, but then you'd have a 10 or so hour experience which wasn't what the devs wanted. And from what I've seen by searching up YouTube videos and hearing what my Twitch chat had to say, it seems like the other arcs they cover in this style, like Enies Lobby, Marineford and Dressrosa, they definitely did things that deviated from the original story. And that's cool and all, but the Alabaster arc should have utilised this concept better, it being the first, instead of doing what it did, which was to absolutely waste my time in a way which was borderline comical. Let's go into it a little deeper. Almost immediately after entering Alabaster, I felt something was wrong. I was happy that characters were commenting on the logic of Memoria and how they would tackle certain situations, like Robin being there at all, considering her position at the time of this arc. But then you run into this gentleman who is not having a good day. Chopper recommends we find stomach medicine for him, but it turns out minions of the Baroque Works organization have been funneling medicine away from the people who need it. So we beat up one of the baddies, and finally we have the medicine. When we talk to the vendor again, he tells us we never needed that medicine in the first place. He was actually just hungry. And this was a little bit annoying, because the game made me run back and forth through the city streets at least 4 times with no teleports. It had wasted my time, but this was okay so long as they didn't do it again.
Honey, you've got a big storm coming.
So, we make it past the checkpoint, and admittedly, they do a few things here I liked, even if their reactions weren't as strong as I'd have imagined. To reiterate, I did enjoy seeing these segments, and I get that this is a memory and they're only reliving the experience. But there are parts where it's pretty much a beat-for-beat retelling of the show, which I guess means they're in character. And then there are moments like this, where it seems Luffy is able to take in a mature breath and enjoy the memory as it's happening, which I did think was pretty nice. It's great to see characters react to old moments in the series with the experiences they've gained along the way. But then shortly after these brief experiences, we're met once again with a roadblock. Instead of a man with a chronic case of the tummy rumblies, we're met with a slight divergence. In the anime and manga, getting to Rainbase, Crocodile's casino, was a lot more straightforward. But in this game, the Navy have already cornered the island, meaning we have to walk. And the first part of our hike is a cave that turns everyone into Zorro, aka completely directionless. We need a special parrot to guide us through safely, and thankfully this guy has plenty in stock. That was a lie. We're actually teleported back to the city because the vendor is there. But he won't join us unless we gift him a big fat pile of nut that you can find around the city using Usopp's sniper ability. So we get to the parrot but are required to walk all the way back to the cave ourselves. At which point my inward complaints were becoming a lot more vocal. If the game keeps doing this, I'd say out loud to myself, the implication of that sentence weighing heavy upon me, but if anything, I am stubborn, so I continued on, hoping that the worst was behind me. And after beating a boss fight, we find ourselves on a massive part of the Alabaster map. Plenty of enemies to fight and treasures to find if you go out of your way, and I was enjoying that aspect quite a bit. But then we reach the eastern part of the map where the main story was supposed to continue, and oh dear, we can't cross due to a raging sea of sand. So the game sends us to the northern part of the map to go through another cave that would lead us to Rainbase. However, Nami gets pickpocketed, and the little darling runs to the very southern point of the map, and you guessed it, we have to walk all the way there. After getting our stuff back and gaining access to a fast travel option that, believe me, was greatly appreciated, we finally make our way through the cave and gain access to Rainbase. Is what I would say if I wasn't dragging this out for comedic effect. No, Luffy decides in admittedly a very Luffy way that punching the boss at the end of the cave directly into the ceiling is a fantastic idea despite his crew telling him to just be normal for 1 second of his funny little life. By doing this, we get a cave-in that completely blocks the exit we were going to use, meaning we need to walk all the way back through the cave to walk all the way back to the eastern side of the map. But after this, we are given a bit of time to breathe and calm down, or maybe that was just me. We make it to Rainbase, meet up with Vivi, a friend in that arc, and whilst there are still moments where we're forced to hit that 30 to 40 hour playtime mark, at this point I felt a second wind hit in. The next location we'd be visiting was Alubana, the capital city, and I knew that this was where this arc would end. And with this, I rushed through the padding segments, beat a few noteworthy bosses, and finally, we were at the final dungeon, the Tomb of Kings. Them turning this location into a dungeon made a lot of sense, and I was honestly having fun again, which I was really relieved about. The finale of this dungeon is, of course, beating Crocodile, and after that we're released back into the loving embrace of Waford, where the mystery still intrigued me. Any island that holds ancient tech that the world government wants covered up are very exciting prospects to manga readers right now. So once again, I buried my doubts and pressed onwards. We're thrown back into another dungeon, this time in pursuit of the second Colossi. We encounter a similar sight, a river of sand with no way to get across, and it was at this point where I truly understood what it felt like to be a Straw Hat, and the utter paralyzing fear that can shoot through your body when you realize your captain, Monkey D. Luffy, has an idea.
I wonder what this game would have looked like had we released it long ago.
Oh, come on now. Luffy's great idea involves us finding the crab that ferried them across the Sand River, get Lim to transform it into a cube, and take it back with us into reality. Something Lim is apparently able to accomplish, and thankfully we do have fast travel this time. However, you still have to run a fair stretch of distance just to reach the eastern borders of the map, and when we get there, it turns out the crab is just too big. Need to find a smaller goddamn crab. So we walk to the Tomb of Kings, we defeat even more roadblocks that stand in our way, and eventually we find the crab and we take it back with us to Waford. And it was at this point where I just couldn't do it anymore. I was miserable, and even if the padding improved, even if it improved 10 minutes later, I really didn't want to take the risk. I'd come to terms with the fact that I'd felt like this before, just never to this extent. I'd completely and utterly burnt myself out, and before you start worrying, I've already got a plan in motion to hopefully get things back on track. And as stated, not all of this was caused by Odyssey. It definitely didn't help, and I still firmly believe all of my previous points still stand regardless. Expect an update video soon where I go into more depth about future plans, potential restructuring of patron rewards, and also the whereabouts of the unreleased Lost Odyssey Part 2 video. It's nothing to worry about, but it'll be nice to get my thoughts out there, I guess. Now, despite everything, I'd still like to give the review a conclusion of sorts. I acknowledge I haven't beaten it, so I can't give it a completionist's review, but I think I have a fair idea of what I want to say. There is an annoying amount of promise found within One Piece Odyssey. The game on a visual level looks fantastic. The original story being told was the core drive of my experience, and the gameplay was an interesting take on a classic formula. But sadly, everything fell apart for me very soon. The gameplay wasn't challenging enough, the padding was just abysmal during the Alabasta segment of the game. And look, if I really did stop just before the game got good, I'm not gonna blame myself for that. It's almost as if the game is afraid of making a solid 20-hour experience and is trying its best to hit the 40-hour quota, in ways that reminded me of Final Fantasy VII Remake. An overall very good game that felt bogged down in places due to its obvious padding. I mean, I don't think people in a few years will be looking back nostalgically at the collapsed expressway robot arm minigame that they repeated 3 times in a row. But then I wasn't expecting Suicune to turn into a Velociraptor in 2023, so I have been surprised before. And it did cross my mind that even games I love do this as well, including a title I really need to talk about on this channel sometime, Nier. But the difference with Nier is, in that game, the subquests serve as great tools for world and character building, as the game's second half relies on your attachment to those elements. Odyssey felt like the devs were using subquests as nothing more than filler to fill up gaps that they created. The story of Nier is also original, but with One Piece, I know those stories already. The game was surely made for people like me, a fan. So taking something as beloved as those stories, gutting them, which is necessary so the devs won't die, and sewing them back up with divergences that I'll say again were interesting in concept, but still don't hold a candle to the original work, it just made me think how much I love One Piece, and how I'd rather be watching or reading that than playing this game. But despite that, I still respect them for trying, and I can't find it in me to say I outright hated it. From a visual standpoint, it's the best the Straw Hats have looked in a video game environment, and the people behind it must have been fans of the source work, or you wouldn't get some fan favorite moments being highlighted and celebrated. So if I had to recommend the game to anyone, it'd be long-term enjoyers of One Piece who might want to experience a weird, disjointed retelling of earlier arcs that they might have not revisited personally in years. But please, if you are a fledgling to the series or are getting interested in starting, do not start with Odyssey. They have these segments that either fill in returning or new fans about who characters are and events that happen, so you aren't going to be completely lost. But the idea of you experiencing each of these arcs for the first time as these stripped down affairs that are filled with standard video game bloat, I don't know, there's something upsetting about that. Experience One Piece first, then play the game, because there's such a unique feeling to the series that no other has been able to replicate. Luffy being this cheeky embodiment of freedom in the One Piece universe, and that freedom affecting anyone he meets. From assisting a country's liberation against a cruel leader, to the simple freedom of giving someone a new lease on life. And hear me out on this next part, I'm not trying to say the One Piece is the adventure we had along the way or anything like that.
I don't think it's funny.
But even if we get to the One Piece and it doesn't live up to the hype, for someone like Luffy, not knowing makes the adventure the most exciting part. He's been on record stating he'd quit being a pirate altogether if someone spoiled the big mystery. And so, for a few more years, I get to experience this exact same feeling with everyone. The thrill of not knowing what's going to happen next, the theory channels that make it their mission to piece together potential clues to cook up some absolutely radical stuff, to the point where I can see backlash happening if some of these don't come true. And whilst this isn't one of those, I remember hearing the unconfirmed theory that Crocodile is Luffy's mum and thinking it was the biggest cock and bollock bullshit I ever did hear. But then I watched a video on it and went, ooh, mummy. To bring this to a close, I know asking this actually helps in the long run, but I'd love to hit the 150k sub mark soon, so if you enjoyed the video, please subscribe, give it a like, and share it around to people you think might enjoy it. If you do start the series or started rewatching because of this video, let me know your thoughts down in the comments. One Piece brings me an immense amount of joy, so knowing I helped get someone else into something that was, for me at least, life-changing, that would make my entire year. So, jump in a Discord call with friends, set aside some time in the evening, and enjoy the adventure Because, like everything, all adventures have to come to an end someday. Just like this video. Play us out, 4Kids Zorro. Hello there, it's me, Credits Boy. Thank you for getting all the way to the end. I've wanted to make a One Piece video for a while now, so with Odyssey coming out, it was kind of this great opportunity for me to finally do that. And was it 2 birds, 1 stone kind of thing, and it was a lot of fun. This is the section where I thank my patrons, and it is really no exaggeration when I say that you guys are helping keep all of the lights on, so I truly, truly appreciate that. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to do something I love, and actually pay me for it. That still is something that I'm slowly coming to terms with, that people actually want to see my stuff. It is incredibly humbling. If you want to see yourself scrolling by on the right, then you can pledge for just $1 per video, or you can pledge $5, which can give you a shout out that you can hear right now. Derry, Kevin G, Shibuya Gato, and Oslo. Thanks again, as always, for your continued support, and I'll see you all again next time.